It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind of day that promised a perfect celebration. The sky was a soft shade of blue, and the sunlight filtered through the golden leaves, giving everything a warm glow. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie and smoothing down the lapels of my suit. It was the nicest suit I owned, charcoal gray, tailored, the kind of thing Karen had insisted I wear to her sister's wedding. Karen was already gone, of course. She had left early to help Lisa with last-minute preparations, though help likely meant drinking mimosas and posing for pre-ceremony pictures. That's how it was with Karen's family. Image mattered more than substance. Still, I was trying to be supportive. Karen's relationship with her sister was complicated, lots of competition mixed with forced affection, but today was supposed to be about celebrating love. I wasn't particularly close to Lisa, but I showed up because that's what you do when you're married. You support your partner. The venue was exactly what I expected, a sprawling estate with manicured gardens, stone fountains, and valet parking. A team of wedding planners buzzed around, adjusting floral arrangements and directing guests to their seats. Everyone was dressed to impress, designer dresses, tailored suits, and perfectly styled hair. I approached the entrance, smiling politely as I handed my invitation to the security guard standing with a clipboard. "Name?" he asked, not bothering to look up. "Thomas Reed," I replied, trying to sound confident. The guard scanned the list. His brow furrowed. "You're not on the list." I blinked. That can't be right. I'm Karen's husband. The guard's face remained neutral. "I'm sorry, sir, but if you're not on the list, I can't let you in." My chest tightened. "Look, this is obviously a mistake. Can you just check again?" But before he could respond, I spotted Karen standing a few feet away with her mother, Vivian. They were watching, smiling. Karen's hand was covering her mouth as if she was trying to stifle a laugh. Vivian wasn't even pretending to hide her amusement. Her head was thrown back in a loud, open-mouthed laugh. It wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. A cold knot formed in my stomach as the guard shifted uncomfortably. I could feel the eyes of other guests on me. Whispers. Curious glances. A few phones lifted discreetly to capture the scene. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation. But I knew that's exactly what Karen and Vivian wanted, for me to cause a scene, to humiliate myself even further. So I swallowed hard, straightened my shoulders, and gave the guard a curt nod. "No problem." Then I turned and walked away. The drive home was a blur. My thoughts raced, replaying the moment over and over. How had it come to this? Karen and I weren't perfect, but I thought we were partners. This felt like more than a wedding snub. It felt deliberate, cruel, like Karen was trying to send me a message. When I got home, I sat in the dark silence of my car for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel. My reflection in the rearview mirror stared back at me, stoic on the surface, but underneath, a storm was brewing. Karen came home late that night, the faint scent of champagne and roses clinging to her. I was sitting on the couch, still in my suit, the tie now loosened around my neck. The TV was on, but I wasn't watching it. My thoughts had been looping in a cruel cycle for hours. She walked in with the easy grace that came naturally to her. Her hair was styled in soft waves, her makeup still flawless despite the long day. She didn't even seem surprised to see me sitting there. "You didn't stay for the ceremony?" she asked, feigning innocence as she kicked off her heels. I studied her face, searching for some flicker of guilt or explanation. I found none. "You knew I wasn't on the list," I said evenly. Karen shrugged, her tone light. "Mom thought it would be best to keep things simple. Lisa wanted an exclusive guest list, you understand, right?" My jaw tightened. "No, Karen, I don't understand." She sighed, clearly annoyed that I wasn't just letting it go. "It wasn't personal, Thomas. It's just, you know how my family is." "Yeah," I said, my voice low. "I do." That night, Karen slept soundly beside me while I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed the scene at the wedding, the laughter, the whispers, the look of amusement on Karen's face. I had been ignored before, brushed aside at family events, but this was different. This was public, calculated. And the worst part? Karen didn't care. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. At first, I thought it was work, but as I scrolled through the notifications, my stomach dropped. Karen had posted a picture from the wedding. She was standing next to Lisa, both of them dressed in sleek white gowns, glasses of champagne in hand. The caption read, "A perfect night with my favorite people, sparkling heart, #family goals, #blessed." I wasn't in the picture. I scrolled down and found a video, one that someone else had posted. It showed me standing awkwardly at the entrance, the guard shaking his head as Karen and Vivian laughed in the background. The caption read, Dash, when you're not on the VIP list faced with tears of joy hashtag awkward husbandments. My face burned with humiliation. The video already had thousands of views and comments. Dash, damn, that's rough. Dash, LOL, imagine getting denied at your own wife's family wedding. Dash, Karen's too good for him anyway. I threw my phone down and sat back, heart pounding. Karen had humiliated me, not just in front of her family, but now in front of the whole world. Later that day, while Karen scrolled through her phone in the living room, I sat across from her. Did you know about the video? Karen barely looked up. What video? I clenched my jaw. The one where I'm standing at the door, being told I'm not on the list while you and your mother are laughing in the background. Her eyes flicked toward me, the tiniest smile curling at the edge of her lips. Oh, that, I repeated. My voice sharpened. Do you have any idea how that made me look? Karen rolled her eyes. Thomas, you're overreacting. It was funny. People like that kind of thing. It wasn't funny to me. She sighed, setting down her phone. God, why do you take everything so seriously? Because it's my life, Karen. My voice was low and sharp. And you made me a joke. She stood up, brushing imaginary lint from her sweater. Look, if you're this upset about it, I'll take the post down. It's not about the post, I snapped. It's about respect. And you don't have any for me. Karen's gaze hardened. Thomas, you're being dramatic. And you're being cruel. Her mouth opened like she was going to respond, but instead, she grabbed her phone and left the room without another word. That night, I sat in my home office, pretending to review project reports while my mind swirled. This wasn't just about the wedding. This was about years of being treated like I was beneath Karen and her family. I had ignored it for so long, convincing myself it didn't matter. But it did matter. And then I overheard Karen talking to her mother on the phone. I stood in the hallway, heart hammering as her words drifted through the door. Dash, Thomas just doesn't get it, Karen said, her voice dripping with irritation. Dash, he thinks budgeting means saying no to a new pair of shoes. It's honestly embarrassing. Vivian's response was muffled, but I caught enough. Dash, it's just a phase. He's not cut out for this life, darling. He'll get tired eventually. A slow, cold anger built in my chest. That's how they saw me, a phase. Someone to tolerate until Karen could move on to someone better. Later that night, Karen climbed into bed without saying a word. I lay beside her, awake and angry, wondering how I had let things get this far. Something had to change. A week passed, but the tension between Karen and me hadn't eased. If anything, it had gotten worse. Karen acted like nothing had happened, as if my humiliation at the wedding was just some passing joke I should have already forgotten about. She kept posting the same perfectly curated pictures on social media, designer dresses, expensive dinners, weekends at exclusive events, all without me. It was becoming painfully clear that I didn't fit into Karen's version of life anymore. Or maybe I never had. The final straw came at a dinner party hosted by one of Karen's socialite friends. It was one of those networking events where everyone pretends they're not competing to see who's the richest, most successful person in the room. I didn't want to go, but Karen insisted. Just smile and try to have a good time, she said as we got ready. It'll be good for you to get out. Good for me. Right. The party was held in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city. Waiters in white jackets carried trays of champagne and appetizers that were too small to be considered actual food. Karen slid into the crowd like she belonged there, because she did. I stood near the bar, nursing a whiskey and feeling completely out of place. Karen was across the room, laughing at something one of her friends said. Her hand was resting on his arm, just a little too familiar. Thomas, right? I turned to see a man in his early 40s, expensive watch, tailored suit, the whole package. He smiled, the kind of smile that wasn't actually friendly. Yeah, I replied. I'm David, he said, extending his hand. I shook it. Karen's husband, right? That's me. David's smile widened. Gotta say, man, you handled yourself pretty well after the wedding. I froze. What? David chuckled. Come on. That video was hilarious. I mean, standing at the door, getting turned away, brutal, but funny. My jaw tightened. Glad you were entertained. Karen's got a sense of humor, huh? He took a sip of his drink. You've got to admire her confidence. My blood boiled. I set my drink down hard on the bar. Excuse me. I crossed the room toward Karen, who was still smiling at her friend like they were the only two people in the world. Karen, I said, my voice sharp. She turned, her expression cool. Thomas? Everything okay? We need to talk. Karen's smile faded. Now. Yes. Now. I grabbed her arm gently, but firmly, and led her toward a quieter corner of the room. What the hell is going on? I hissed. Karen's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about, I said through clenched teeth. That video from the wedding, people are still talking about it. About me. Karen sighed, clearly annoyed. Thomas, this isn't a big deal. Aren't you even a little bit embarrassed by how you treated me? Her mouth curled into a thin smile. You're the one who's embarrassed. Not me. My chest tightened. That's the problem, Karen. You don't care. Karen's eyes darkened. You're blowing this way out of proportion. No, I said, my voice low. You've spent years making me feel like I'm not good enough. Like I'm beneath you. And you know what? I've put up with it because I love you. But I'm starting to think that's not enough anymore. Karen's face hardened. What are you saying? I'm saying, I took a steady breath, that maybe we're not working anymore. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes, not sadness, but panic. I'm going home, I said. Don't bother coming with me. I was sitting in my home office the next evening, trying to figure out how to process everything when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I picked it up. Hello? Thomas. A woman's voice. It's Melissa. Melissa. Lisa's event planner, she said. I know this is out of the blue, but I thought you should know something. My pulse quickened. Okay. Melissa sighed. I quit after the wedding. Too much drama. But there's something you don't know about how that whole thing was handled. What do you mean? She hesitated. Karen and Vivian, they planned it. The security thing at the door? It wasn't a mistake. It was staged. My stomach dropped. What? Vivian said it would be funny, that it would keep you in your place. Karen went along with it. My hands curled into fists. Are you sure? I heard them talking about it, Melissa said. I thought you should know. I sat there in stunned silence. And one more thing, Melissa added. The wedding expenses, they didn't come out of Vivian's pocket. My throat tightened. Then where did they come from? Melissa paused. Your joint account. My blood turned cold. Excuse me. They drained your savings to cover the wedding. Karen knew. She said you'd never notice. A long silence settled between us. Thomas. Melissa's voice was soft. I've got to go, I said, hanging up. Karen was in the kitchen when I walked in. She was scrolling through her phone, looking like nothing was wrong. I set a stack of bank statements on the counter in front of her. What's this? She asked, not looking up. Care to explain why $40,000 is missing from our account? Karen's head snapped up. What are you talking about? Melissa told me. My voice was ice cold. About the wedding. About how you staged the whole thing to humiliate me. Karen's face paled. It wasn't. I didn't. And the money? I pressed. Karen's lips parted. We were going to pay it back. Jesus, Karen. My voice rose. You stole from me. You humiliated me. You made me a joke to your friends. Karen's eyes welled up with tears. Thomas, I wanted everything to be perfect. For who? I shot back. For Lisa? For your mother? For the people following you online? Karen opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. I'm done. Her eyes widened. Wait. I'm done, I repeated, my voice steady. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. I packed my bags that night. Karen sat on the bed, watching me with tear-filled eyes. You don't have to do this, she whispered. Yes, I do. She stood, grabbing my arm. Thomas, please. I shook her hand off. You already gave up on us, Karen. I'm just catching up. I walked to the door, my bag slung over my shoulder. You'll regret this, Karen called after me. I turned back, meeting her tearful gaze. No, I said quietly. I won't. And then I walked out. It had been a week since I walked out. A strange kind of silence had settled over my life, not the uncomfortable kind, but the peaceful kind. I was staying at a small, no-frills apartment downtown. It wasn't much, a bed, a couch, a small kitchen, but it was mine. Karen had called me a few times. I didn't answer. She had sent texts, some apologetic, some defensive. I didn't answer those either. The last text I got from her read. Thomas, I'm sorry. We can fix this. Just come home. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life. I threw myself into work. Being a project manager had always suited me. I liked the structure, the predictability. After the chaos of my marriage, the spreadsheets and deadlines were almost soothing. But the fallout from the wedding was still spreading, and it was about to hit Karen harder than she ever expected. It started with an article. I was sitting in my office when Jeff, one of my coworkers, knocked on the door. "Hey, Thomas, have you seen this?" He handed me his phone. It was open to a gossip blog, the kind that covers celebrity divorces and influencer meltdowns. The headline read, "Wedding Fallout, Behind the Scenes of a Social Media Disaster." I frowned and scrolled down. My eyes widened as I read. Sources close to the Reed family reveal that Karen Reed and her mother Vivian staged a humiliating scene at Lisa's wedding to create social media buzz. But the plan backfired when the video of Thomas Reed being denied entry at the wedding went viral, leading to public backlash and major financial consequences. Insiders claim that Vivian and Karen misused funds to cover the wedding expenses, even draining Thomas Reed's personal savings without his consent. Attempts to reach Karen Reed for comment have been unsuccessful. My stomach twisted. "Jesus," I muttered. "That's not the best part," Jeff said. He scrolled down to the comments section. Wow, imagine humiliating your own husband for internet clout. Karen Reed is a fraud. Her whole lifestyle is built on stolen money. Thomas deserves better. Someone start a GoFundMe for this guy. I handed Jeff's phone back, shaking my head. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, even though I wasn't sure if that was true. The fallout didn't stop with the article. Karen's social media started bleeding followers. The perfectly filtered photos, the carefully constructed captions, it all started to fall apart. People were leaving comments on every post. Fake. How could you do that to your husband? Looks like the perfect life wasn't so perfect after all. Brands started pulling sponsorship deals. Karen had built her influence on the image of being part of a glamorous, successful family. Now that image was ruined. But it didn't end there. A few days later, I got a call from Karen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Thomas." Her voice was shaky. I need to talk to you." "What is it?" "They're pulling everything," she said. "My sponsorships, the brand deals, even Lisa's wedding planner is threatening to sue because some of the vendors haven't been paid." I frowned. "Not my problem." "Thomas," her voice cracked. "They're going after my mother. The creditors, they're saying we misrepresented our assets when we applied for loans." I sat back in my chair. And we could be sued," Karen said. "I could lose everything." "You already lost me," I said coldly. "Thomas, please." "You're only calling because you need something," I cut her off. "That's all this ever was, wasn't it? I was good for stability, for security. But now that your life is falling apart, you want me to fix it." "I made a mistake," she whispered. "No, Karen," I said. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. What you did was deliberate. You lied to me. You humiliated me. You stole from me." Tears filled her voice. "I didn't mean." "But you did," I said. "You meant to hurt me. And now it's coming back to you." "Thomas, I love you," Karen whispered. "You love what I gave you," I said. "And you love the life you built using my money. But me? You never loved me." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Goodbye, Karen." I hung up. A few days later, I got another call from Vivian. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Thomas," Vivian's voice was tight, clipped. "We need to talk." "No, we don't. You don't understand it." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You and Karen built your life around appearances. And now the truth is out." Vivian's voice sharpened. "We can fix this. You have contacts, people in finance, in PR. If you would just..." I laughed bitterly. "Let me get this straight. You humiliate me, steal from me, and treat me like I'm not good enough. And now you want me to save you." Vivian's voice hardened. "You were always too sensitive, Thomas. And you were always a narcissist," I shot back. "Figure it out yourself." I ended the call before she could say another word. Karen called a few more times after that. I never answered. The more distance I put between myself and Karen's world, the clearer things became. For years, I had convinced myself that I was lucky to be with her, that Karen was somehow out of my league. But the truth was, I had been holding that whole relationship together. Karen had never been my partner. She had been a user, and I had let her. Not anymore. One evening, I was sitting at a coffee shop when I saw a familiar face. Clara. She was a photographer I'd met through a mutual friend a few years back. She was sitting at a table by the window, sipping coffee and flipping through a notebook. I hesitated for a moment, then walked over. "Hey," I said. She looked up, smiling. "Thomas, mind if I sit?" "Not at all." We talked for hours about work, about life, about nothing and everything. Clara wasn't like Karen. She wasn't polished or curated. She was real. And I found myself laughing, genuinely laughing, for the first time in months. When we got up to leave, she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and smiled. "I'd like to see you again." I smiled back. "I'd like that too." A month later, I got one last message from Karen. Dash, "I'm sorry for everything. I hope you find happiness." I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it. No response. No lingering bitterness. Just silence. Karen had been a chapter in my life, but that chapter was over. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited about what came next. 3 months had passed since I left Karen. 3 months since I stopped wondering if my phone would buzz with an apology or some desperate attempt to patch things up. 3 months since I stopped waiting for an explanation that would never come. In that time, I had started to feel like myself again, or maybe for the first time in years, I was figuring out who I actually was. My new apartment was small, but it was mine. No marble countertops or designer furniture. Just a cozy couch, some framed photos of places I'd visited, and a record player I'd found at a thrift store. Simple, comfortable, honest. Karen had called a few more times, always from a different number after I'd blocked the last one. The voicemails were a mix of apologetic and defensive. Dash, "Thomas, please call me back. We can fix this." Dash, "Why are you being so stubborn?" Dash, "You owe me a conversation." I didn't owe her anything. One evening, I was sitting on the balcony with a glass of whiskey, watching the city lights, when my phone buzzed. This time, it was a text from Jeff. "Jeff, big meeting tomorrow. You ready?" Me. Always. Work had become my focus. I had taken on a leadership role at the company, spearheading a high-stakes project for a major client. Jeff and I had been working on it for months, and tomorrow was the final presentation. I leaned back in my chair, feeling that rare sense of calm that comes when you know you're finally in control of your own life. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't dreading tomorrow. The next morning, I walked into the conference room dressed in a fitted navy suit, not the one Karen had picked out for me, but one I had chosen myself. Jeff was already there, setting up the presentation. "Looking sharp," Jeff said. "Feeling sharp," I replied. We nailed the pitch. The client signed on the spot, shaking my hand with a smile. "Fantastic work," he said. "We'll be in touch." As soon as the client left, Jeff clapped me on the back. "You just saved the quarter, man." I smiled. "Feels good." "It should," Jeff said. "The boss wants to talk to you later, something about a promotion." My smile widened. "I'll take that meeting." That night, I decided to celebrate. Jeff invited me out for drinks with some coworkers, but I turned him down. Instead, I found myself walking toward a small gallery downtown. Clara had mentioned the exhibit a few days ago. I hadn't committed to going, but now I was curious. When I walked in, the room was softly lit, the walls lined with framed black and white photographs. I spotted Clara almost immediately. She was standing near a display, talking to an older woman. She was wearing a simple black dress, her dark hair falling loosely around her shoulders. She smiled when she saw me. "You made it," she said. I did. She looked up at me, her expression warm. "Want the tour?" "I'm all yours," I said. She led me through the gallery, explaining the inspiration behind the photos. Most of them were portraits of everyday people, candid moments of joy and struggle. Clara had this way of seeing beauty in things other people overlooked. "You have a good eye," I said as we stopped in front of one of her pieces. She smiled softly. "I think it's more about paying attention." We wandered toward a quieter corner of the gallery. Clara leaned against the wall, her eyes studying me. "So, how are you really doing?" I hesitated. "Better." She nodded. "I can tell." I met her gaze. "Clara." "Yeah. I don't know where this is going," I said honestly. "But I like where it's heading." Clara smiled, her brown eyes shining. "Me too." I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. A week later, Karen called again. I was sitting at my desk when her name popped up on my phone screen. I stared at it for a moment before answering. "Thomas," she said. Her voice was soft. "Careful, Karen. I wanted to say I'm sorry," she said. "I know I've said that before, but I mean it." I leaned back in my chair. "Okay. I ruined everything," Karen said, her voice breaking. "And now my life is a mess. Mom won't talk to me. Lisa's blaming me for everything that happened, and the sponsorship deals, they're gone. I didn't say anything. I know I don't deserve anything from you, she continued. But I miss you. My chest tightened. I don't know who I am without you, Karen whispered. And there it was, the real reason she was calling. It wasn't about me. It was about her. That's the problem, Karen, I said softly. You never really knew who you were. You were too busy trying to be someone else. A long silence stretched between us. Can we try again? Karen asked, her voice barely a whisper. No, I said gently. We can't. Her breath hitched. Thomas. I hope you figure things out, I said. But I'm not the answer. I hung up, and this time, I didn't feel angry or sad. Just relieved. 2 weeks later, I was walking through the park when I spotted Clara sitting on a bench with a camera in her hands. She was focused on something in the distance, a little boy playing with his dog. I walked up behind her. Got the shot? I asked. She smiled up at me. Almost. I sat down beside her. What are you doing later? She raised an eyebrow. That depends. Dinner, I suggested. Clara's smile widened. Sounds like a plan. We sat there for a while, watching the dog chase a stick across the grass. Clara slipped her hand into mine. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The last time Karen reached out to me was about a month later. It was a short text. I'm sorry. I hope you're happy. I didn't respond. I was happy. Because I had finally learned that love isn't about appearances or status, it's about respect. It's about knowing who you are and finding someone who accepts you for that. Karen had taught me that, but not in the way she intended. I slipped my phone into my pocket and turned toward Clara. She was waiting for me by the coffee shop, smiling as the afternoon sun lit up her face. I smiled back. Ready? Clara asked. Yeah, I said, taking her hand. Let's go. And just like that, I moved on.